Keanu Reeves chases little black beggar girl who stole his costly watch. Ends in tears. Keanu Reeves stepped out of the luxury hotel, the warm glow of the evening sun casting long shadows on the pavement. Dressed in his usual black suit, he looked every bit the Hollywood superstar that he was. As he walked towards his car, he felt a slight tug on his wrist. Before he could react, a small, frail-looking girl darted past him, clutching something tightly in her hand. Keanu instinctively checked his wrist. His watch, an expensive custom-made piece, was gone. His eyes widened in shock as he realized the little girl had stolen it. Without a second thought, he sprinted after her. The girl was fast, weaving through the crowded streets like a shadow, slipping between people and disappearing around corners. Keanu, despite his years of action movies, struggled to keep up, but he was determined. As he ran, he noticed something odd. The girl wasn't running randomly. She had a destination. She turned into a narrow alley, barely wide enough for a person to pass through. Keanu followed, his heart pounding. The alley opened up into a small hidden courtyard. The girl stood at the far end, breathing heavily. Keanu slowed down, catching his breath. "Give it back," he said, his voice calm but firm. The girl clutched the watch tightly, her dark eyes filled with fear and defiance. "I need it," she whispered. Keanu took a step closer. "That's not yours." She hesitated, then suddenly bolted towards a rusty metal door at the back of the courtyard. Keanu lunged, barely managing to grab her arm before she could escape. She struggled, kicking and twisting, but he held firm. "Let me go," she screamed. Keanu didn't let go, but his grip softened. "Why did you take it?" Tears welled up in her eyes, but she shook her head stubbornly. "You wouldn't understand," Keanu sighed. "Try me." For a moment, the girl seemed to consider it. Then, without warning, she bit his hand. Hard. Keanu yelped in pain, reflexively letting go. In an instant, she was gone, slipping through the metal door and vanishing into the darkness beyond. Keanu cursed under his breath, shaking his hand. He had lost her, and his watch. But something about the encounter nagged at him. He wasn't angry, he was curious. Why had she stolen the watch? And why had she looked so desperate? He glanced around. The courtyard was filled with signs of struggle. Discarded clothes, old blankets, empty cans. Someone lived here. Someone who had nothing. Keanu made a decision. He wasn't going to let this go. Not because of the watch, but because of the girl. He needed to know the truth. He pushed open the metal door and stepped into the unknown. Keanu stepped through the rusty metal door into a dimly lit, narrow passage. The air was thick with the scent of damp concrete and something faintly metallic. His footsteps echoed as he moved cautiously forward. He didn't know what he was expecting. A gang of thieves? A hidden den? But something told him this was more than just a simple robbery. The passage opened up into a small makeshift shelter. A thin mattress lay on the floor, covered with a torn blanket. A few plastic bags filled with belongings were stacked in the corner. And there, curled up against the wall, was the little girl, his watch still clutched tightly in her hands. She flinched as he stepped closer. "I told you to leave me alone," she muttered. Keanu didn't respond right away. Instead, he crouched down, making himself smaller, less threatening. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said softly. "I just want to understand." She looked at him for a long moment, then sighed. "You wouldn't care." "Try me," he repeated. The girl hesitated, then slowly uncurled her fingers, revealing the watch. But she didn't hand it back. Instead, she turned it over, rubbing a thumb over the smooth glass. "It's not about the money," she said. "I needed it for something else." Keanu waited. He could see the conflict in her eyes. Finally, she spoke. "My little brother, he's sick. He has a fever, and it's getting worse. I don't have money for medicine. I was going to sell this." Keanu's breath caught in his throat. He had expected an excuse, a lie. But this was something else. "Where is he?" he asked. The girl hesitated, then pointed to the other side of the room. Keanu turned his head and saw a small bundle of blankets. Underneath them, a frail-looking boy lay shivering, his face flushed with fever. His breathing was shallow, uneven. Keanu's heart clenched. He had spent his life playing heroes on screen. But this was real. This was a child fighting for his life in a forgotten corner of the city. Without another word, Keanu reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He dialed a number, speaking quickly. Within minutes, a car arrived outside the alley. The girl tensed. "What are you doing?" "Helping." She shook her head. "I don't need—" "Yes, you do." His voice was firm but kind. "Come on." She hesitated, looking at her brother. Then slowly she nodded. Keanu lifted the boy gently, carrying him to the car. The girl followed, her small hands clenched into fists. At the hospital, doctors took the boy in immediately. Keanu and the girl sat outside, silent. When the doctor finally returned, he smiled. "He'll be okay. It's a severe fever, but we caught it in time." The girl let out a shaky breath, her eyes filling with tears. She turned to Keanu, looking at him as if seeing him for the first time. "Why did you help us?" Keanu thought for a moment, then smiled. "Because sometimes people just need a second chance." She hesitated, then slowly extended her hand, offering his watch back. Keanu shook his head. "Keep it." Her eyes widened. "But it's just a watch," he said simply. "You and your brother? You're worth more than that." Tears spilled down her cheeks. For the first time in a long time, she felt seen. Sometimes what seems like a crime is actually a cry for help. True kindness is not about punishing mistakes, but understanding the pain behind them.